Hey everybody, Jonathan Bailor back with another Calorie Myth Show episode, and today's show is an excellent one because we have a very charismatic, knowledgeable, and well-versed individual in an area that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is an emerging area of science that we can all jump on board with and can help us all very much, as evidenced by the wild success of her most recent book, The Hunger Fix, which is awesomely a New York Times best-selling book, and she is none other than the electrifying Dr. Pam Peeke. Dr. Peeke, welcome to the show.
Oh my God, just let me get my finger out of the socket here if I'm that electrifying. But there it is.
Dr. Peeke, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. I've been hearing about you and following your work for a really long time, and I'm a huge fan of your most recent book, The Hunger Fix, the 3-stage detox and recovery plan for overeating and food addiction. So kudos to you, madam.
Well, you know something? It was time. And as a physician who's been dealing with this and a scientist for many years, I knew there had to be something going on. You know, seriously, when my patients come in sounding like junkies, I need a fix, withdrawal's killing me, where's my hit? I can't get off the stuff. You think they'd be talking about meth or Coke or something.
Yep.
And then they'll tell me it's pasta, bread, cupcakes. And then, of course, you and I could laugh and go, oh, isn't that funny? Then we say to ourselves, I don't know, we do the same thing, don't we?
Yep.
And then I've been following all of the work done by the National Institutes of Health and my wonderful colleague and friend, Dr. Nora Volkow, who's head of the National Institute of Drug Abuse. And lo and behold, sometimes you just get lucky. Finally, we hit a tipping point in the amount of research that was done, so that what we can really do now is say, hey, we have enough compelling evidence now to say this, that sugar is more addictive, refined sugar is more addictive than cocaine, morphine, or heroin, and that what we're doing is saying that the relationship between food and addiction is absolutely 100% real and credible.
So, Dr. Peeke, that is undeniable and it is true. However, it seems to not be accepted by the mainstream because we're essentially dealing cocaine in our schools, if I'm understanding you correctly. And how
I'm all about it.
How can we allow
well,
that to
actually,
happen?
What's happening is there's a groundswell among scientists who are now saying, sort of, duh, sugar, refined sugar does ignite the reward center at the uber level.
Mm-hmm.
There's the apple level, which is, wow, that was really special. And we really like that apple and that was good stuff. And then there's the uber level, which is, Twinkies and Ho-Hos and, things like this, refined sugar products, basically. And so in vulnerable minds, in vulnerable brains, you're going to have that igniting going on. Researchers are now understanding how compelling and powerful this is. That's the good news. Mm-hmm. But to your point, this is not siphoned down to and filtered down to schools, our families, all the rest of it. People know that there's something definitely wrong. They know inherently that when they touch a lot of this food, that they feel completely out of control. They're very much like an alcoholic does, a drug addict. But, the big time science hasn't siphoned down to them yet. Because frankly, look, Jonathan, it's neuroscience, not exactly something you scope out when you get home from, 10 hours of working. And so what we're doing now, that's why I wrote my book, I turned it into consumer language. I said, you're not going out of your mind. There is something going on, physiologic and organic, in both the reward center of your brain and in the smarty pants part of your brain, right behind your forehead, the prefrontal cortex, which helps you rein in impulsivity. They're both impaired. They're both going through organic changes that are physiologic, no different than, say, when an alcoholic ends up with liver disease. Mm-hmm. It's the same stuff. But now we're getting enough evidence that slowly but surely we're messaging this, pushing it out to the public so that we can help them. That means the kids in schools. That means basically pushing the, as it were, the cocaine in schools, as you so, appropriately said. So, we've got work ahead of us. It's brand new science, but we're getting there.
Dr. Peeke, how do you combat this, let's call it the myth of moderation, where now that we understand that concentrated sugar is much more analogous to, again, like a nicotine, and we don't tell our children, smoke in moderation, it's only reasonable. Anyone who says anything else is an extremist. How do you combat that dogma?
I think that you're absolutely correct. This is where we're standing, right? So the easiest thing in the world, I'm being completely ridiculous about this, is getting off coke, heroin, whatever. Why? Because you're either on the wagon or you're off. There's nothing in between. Well, we're going to put you on a diet of moderate heroin, just little bits. Don't forget that mid-afternoon heroin. How stupid is that? You're either on the bus, you're off the bus. Okay? Period. Black and white. End of story. When it comes to food, ruh-roh, we got ourselves a problem. And that is refined sugar, and basically not just sugar, but the hyperpalatables, the sugary, fatty, salty combos are everywhere. There's refined sugar in ketchup. It's in salad dressing. It's probably in my wallpaper. I haven't checked. I don't know. It's everywhere. So when you've got an issue like that, plus you do have to eat, then you've got yourself a challenge. Meaning that when you talk about portions, well, it's deeper than portions. Because what will happen is you have to tell your true truth, Jonathan. People out there have to say, which foods do I feel loss of control with? You know what they are. This is not subtle, right? Make a little list. Look at it. And no matter how many times you say, oh, I swear I'll be able to do it this time, and then once again, you're off and running on another binge, right? And I just had one cookie. It was just but then it ignited in your reward center, doing, I want more and more because of the organic changes that took place. I discuss those organic changes in my book, The Hunger Fix, about 28 different which ways, so you can really understand what these are. All right. So what do? Well, as it turns out, when it comes to cocaine, meth, heroin, little goodies like that, we have algorithms that we follow. We've got intervention, shows on television, and, we're shipping people off to rehab and doing all that stuff. So we have detox and recovery. All right. What do we do for food? Well, one of the easiest things to do is just look at those foods that don't seem to be working for you. When it comes to loss of control, and you got to tell your truth again about those and say to yourself, right now as we sit, they're not working for me because it just doesn't work for whatever reason. Maybe they are, igniting my reward center and I'm just feeling so out of control. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just sort of, put them aside for the time being and just say to myself, there are a zillion other foods I could be eating instead that don't ignite my reward center, and I'll just do that. So a small portion of heroin, right, does the same thing as a large portion of heroin. It's the same thing. It ignites your brain when you're vulnerable. Now, there are also people who say all foods are fair game. So when you're trying to treat yourself with this, one of the things that a lot of people who study disordered eating say is that when you have an issue with food and addiction, you're binging, right? I mean, you're binging. You're not delicately having a little cupcake. Instead, it's just you're having at it. It's a dozen at a time, right? Or maybe 6, whatever. So now you say to yourself, well, maybe what I need to do is redefine my relationship with food. All foods. Maybe you look at that cupcake and say, something? I can handle one cupcake. Well, then you experiment. You have one, see what happens. If it ignites and you're off and running, probably not such a great idea to have this stuff around for the time being until you can kind of practice understanding. Maybe it'll never work for you. See, that's the thing about food. There's variability here. There are some people who have just sworn off specific foods. There is life without Twizzlers. Okay? Seriously, there's life without Twizzlers. I mean, so cry me a river here if you never have another Twizzler. So what? Maybe it works for you. So you are abstinent of that particular food-like product. I can't grace it with the name food, but we'll call it a food-like or a science fair project. So there it is. All right. So that's one way to do it. So there are just certain things you just learn to, will never work for you. Then there are others, maybe 5 years down the pike, you might want to try it again. And in my book, The Hunger Fix, I have this whole algorithm for re-exposure. It's either going to work or it doesn't. Life's one big experiment here when it comes to food and addictive, like eating behaviors. There's some people who just get more relief out of just, to hell with it. I'm just keeping these certain foods out of my life because they're just nothing but trouble. It's like running around with the wrong gang. It's like, it's too much. I'm exhausted with this whole thing. Then there's others who say, well, I don't want to feel deprived and I do want to get back to that Twizzler at some point. Well, maybe you might want to, figure out how you're going to do that. And I'm kind of an advocate of just sitting back and looking at your relationship with each of these foods. They come with memories. They come with hefty bags of relationship issues and connections with other people and things and whatever. That's the way it works. So this is why you need some help as you're sort of parsing through a lot of this.
A bit of an intervention, certainly. Well, Dr. Peeke, to dig a level deeper, this is for my own sake too. I'm curious about this in your research and what you've seen. A lot of these things which can cause binge-like eating. Let's say cookies, cakes, and pies. Cookies, cakes, and pies have existed for a very long time. Cookies, cakes, and pies existed when the obesity rate was sub 3% in the early 1900s.
That's right.
Why do you think in 1914 individuals ate cookies, cakes, and pies, and we had a sub 3% level of obesity? And today in 2014, when people eat cookies, cakes, and pies, we have a 70+% overweight and obesity rate.
One of my patients called those the round foods because you forgot the donut too.
Oh, there you go.
No, listen, look, this is what happened. When they made cookies, cakes, and pies way back when, they used real food. Think about that for a second. They used real food. And here's another thing. Those kinds of foods were not available 24/7. Those were what we used to call a treat. That's right. The definition of a treat is you don't have it 24/7. All right. Then it becomes a staple. So no, they had it as a treat. So the brain was perfectly fine with that. Every now and then when you had a treat, no matter what it was, right? Then your brain went up to that uber level. It was like, wow, that tastes really good. And that was wonderful. And then it came right back down again because guess what? You had one cookie, honey. In those days, you didn't go, wow, let's go get a pack of cookies at the 7-Eleven. Whoops. Oh, that was in 1670. They didn't have a 7-Eleven. No. Instead, they had limited resources, and they only had 12 cookies and 6 kids. So let's do math. How many cookies is each kid going to get? So we had real treats. I love treats. I think they're wonderful. I had no idea they were going to be available on every corner 24/7 and cheap and made of, refined processed stuff so that now you can ignite that reward center anytime you want to. So things were very different then. And heck, I'm also going to tell you, newsflash, you were a heck of a lot more physically active then too. I mean, there was no, let's hop in the Beamer and get to school. Really? Yeah, school's that way. 4 miles, get trucking. And that's the way it always went. It was a completely different world we lived in. We got to bed earlier. No one was staring at screens until midnight and then foraging around in the kitchen late at night. Seriously? Your ass was in bed at 7 o'clock because you didn't have any electricity.
Yep.
And you got up when the little tweeters were going at it in the morning. And then you were hauling it all over the place, helping mom. And if you were on a farm, you're out there. Come on, a farm is a Gold's Gym. Who needs a gym when the heifer just went through the fence? You know, you're finding the heifer, no one else. You want breakfast? There's the barn. That's right. There's eggs and milk in there. You find them. So you paid a price to eat. There was a nice balance going on here, and it's for real. They say that a man on a farm, like a real farm, you know, he's right behind the plow and everything. Want to guess how many calories he burned every day?
How many?
Hint. There's no international harvester thing showing up that he can sit on and just kind of go like this all day. No, he went anywhere between 5,000 and 7,000 calories a day. Okay, no obesity there, you know, because his little behind was just working it. A woman, 2,000 to 3,000 calories. You ever try to make bread with your hands? That's right. You ever try to clean clothes on one of those little, you know, board things? Oh my God, I'm talking about some serious muscles here. So you were working it all the time. Not so much today. So, Jonathan, in all seriousness, this whole issue of packing on a whole bunch of extra weight is straightforward. It is complex. It involves psychosocial, cultural changes, biological changes, huge environmental, epigenetic, and genetic change-ups. All kinds of, you know, elements are converging, and this is kind of what we're seeing. That's why I love when you say the calorie myth. I think that that's a great idea, because a calorie is not a calorie. When I have a calorie from an almond, it's real different than that Twinkie calorie. We're looking at quality. We're looking at macronutrients. We're looking at polluting or non-polluting our bodies. Well, the same thing's going here. We just got into foods that are not foods. They're science fair projects. And then we got into specific hyperpalatable, so sugary, fatty, salty stuff that got infused into all of our eating. And that continued to ignite our reward center at very high levels and in vulnerable brains, making you want more and more, which starts the addictive cycle. The research that's been done at the National Institutes of Health has clearly shown that food and substances of abuse follow the same track into the reward center. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, duh, you know, because the reason why you and I are having this delightful conversation today with all this high tech and fancy schmancy is because of two things. There were two things that got us here, and they both involve reward. One is sex, and one is food. All right, not necessarily in that order. So all of our ancestors were having a little go at it a zillion years ago, kind of liking it. If they didn't like food or sex, they wouldn't do it. We've actually experimented with animals where we take, you know, we play with their genetics so that they have absolutely no reward from food. They just sit there looking at food like a lump of coal, and they die. Okay, so they better find reward in it, or we wouldn't be foraging for it. But what happened was it went all crazy and haywire. I'm not going to address sex because 50 Shades of Grey took care of that. All right, I'm going to stick with food, where the hunger fix took care of that. And basically what we found was that instead of eating real foods and having a balanced life of you know, appropriate sleep, of friendships, of good relationships, of balance in our life, whole foods, and appropriate physical activity. Instead of all that happening, what we ended up with were little science fair projects that kept lighting us up in our brain. And when it did that, honey, in a vulnerable brain, and according to the last epidemiologic study, it's 1 out of every 5 to 6 women meet criteria for food and addiction or addictive-like eating behaviors. And even if they didn't meet criteria, that's the Yale Food Addict Scale, which you could Google or you can find in my book or my website, drpeeke.com. What you find is that the largest group of people are the people who are almost addicted. Almost. They're on the launch pad. They're not like beyond impaired. They're just not having a good time, and they're packing it on. Now, by the way, people who have addictive-like eating behaviors come in all sizes. One of my toughest patients is a size 4.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she does it is she just chronically restricts all good foods
Yeah.
and gets her fixes, something I call false fixes,
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day. And she's higher than a kite, happy, and she looks great in her size 4,
Mm-hmm.
and she keeps her little secret to herself.
Well, Dr. Peeke, speaking of that secret, and we're getting short on time here, and I could talk to you literally all day. So I got to get this one last question in here before our real final question, which is, so you talked about the activity and the exercise component, and I love that you brought that up, because when we start to perceive this as like an addiction, for example, someone saying that I will exercise off the pack of cigarettes I just smoked is absurd. But we do see, for example, Frosted Flakes. On a box of Frosted Flakes, it's like it's encouraging kids to be active and to move more. And the one of the number one arsenals in these edible product manufacturers' tool shed is kids just need to be more active. They can continue to eat our foods if we would just be more active. But if these are more analogous to pharmaceuticals, that seems to not make much sense. What do you think about that?
Which is why I'm a big hit with the food industry and all of the scientists who say the same thing. And that is, of course, it's ridiculous. When you look at Fruit Loops and Count Chocula and all the rest of this stuff, it's basically, you know what they are? They're nothing more than vehicles for sugar, for the delivery of sugar. That's all they are. And then to say that, now and go out and work it off, when the kid then just had, like 3 extra bowls because his reward center was ignited. Okay, that made sense. So obviously they're covering up for their, the errors of their ways in providing this kind of stuff, which isn't food, it's just junk. And it's junk food, I suppose. So obviously, we're crossing wires on this whole thing. They need to fess up and kind of say, come on, man, let's back off all of this refined sugar stuff. And let's just all grow up here. Read the literature, for crying out loud. We now have reams of credible, peer-reviewed science that has just been, absolutely published and now fully appreciated by large groups of professionals now who are basically saying we need to do something at the public policy level, as well as, what are we doing in schools? What are we doing when we make this available friggin' in hospitals everywhere? I mean, between you and me, I'm the senior science advisor to the largest addiction and disordered eating group in the country, and that's Elements Behavioral Health. And one of the things I'm doing is setting up an exciting program where I'm now looking at the kind of food that people who are coming off detox into recovery are actually eating. The old school way of looking at this, which you see in so many other centers, is, oh, heck, let them eat birthday cake all day. We're just so happy they're not robbing banks and, stealing from their mother and, shooting up. Well, I beg to differ, because there's a transfer addiction a bunch of you out there know all about. Everything from cigarettes to alcohol to drugs and all the rest of it, where you pack on a boatload of weight after you come clean with the typical substances of abuse. Well, guess what? Now we're fixing that. We're using the new science. See how it's going to help people, Jonathan? We're going to be able to help reduce relapse. People are so bummed out when they pack on 50 after they get sober and clean that they want to go back. I mean, it's miserable. And I've listened to this time and time again. So in my book, we actually come up with what we call healthy fixes, which are tasty, delicious. They'll never know it's healthy. And it really satisfies them. Combinations of protein and fiber that decrease carb cravings, all science-based. Makes you feel wonderful all day long. So that's what we're trying to do.
Brilliant. Well, I love this. When you talk about things we can do, things we can put into action, what is next for you? Obviously, you're still riding the wave of the great success of your book, The Hunger Fix, but what's next for you, and where can folks learn more about you?
Well, they can learn a heck of a lot more about me by going to my website, Dr. Peeke, DrPeeke.com. Go to my Facebook, Dr. Pam Peeke. So that's Peeke. Just come on over and like me. I'll like you back. And then the same thing with, following me on Twitter as well, at Pam Peeke MD. So you can follow me all the way through. And then my website, Dr. Peeke, DrPeeke.com. And Jonathan, in answer to your question, I'm going to be taking what I'm doing now in the addiction arena, especially with my work with Elements Behavioral Health, and I'm going to let it rock. I'm going to, be putting these programs in, and at the same time, the word's going to get out. I already have a New York Times writer who's following my every step now with this brand new, groundbreaking program. As we really make waves, as we, create a groundswell, so that we can add our voice to the mounting voices of scientists and public policymakers saying we got to think about what we're putting in our mouths because it's changing our gene expression and that of our children. And we need to look at generations ahead in addition to the people we're loving and caring for right now.
Well, brilliant. Well, I salute you, Dr. Peeke. It's such a noble mission. Frankly, I can't think of one any more noble than taking care of the current generations and generations to come. So kudos to you, and thank you for all of your wonderful work and for sharing your time with us today.
Well, I thank you too, because it's only when we tag team as messengers that we ever get this word out. So we just keep adding and adding and adding. All right. So we're getting it out to all of your followers and mine. We're making certain that we could just touch people and give them hope, for crying out loud, especially people who've just, felt helpless, hopeless, and defeated. You don't have to do that anymore.
I love it. Well, Dr. Peeke, thank you so much for joining us today. And viewers, again, our guest is the lovely and brilliant and courageous Dr. Pamela Peeke, and her book is The Hunger Fix, which you can get anywhere books are sold, or of course on Amazon.com. And be sure to check out her website at drpeeke.com. And of course, remember this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. We'll chat with you soon. Bye.
Bye.